Perfect. Okay. Hello, my name's Nena Complo, and I am so excited to be here today talking with Lynnea Laessig of Ironwood, Michigan. Sorry. And Lynnea is a mother, a community leader, and a radical birth worker. She runs Mama Tuki, which is an awesome community organization in the Western Upper Peninsula of Michigan that supports moms in all phases of motherhood, all phases of their journey. And she also is one half of the duo that runs Healing Birth, which is an online organization that supports women who are healing from birth trauma. And today we are going to be talking about birth trauma and just opening up the conversation about some definitions and terms you might hear around the topic of birth trauma, and just start to get into this very big and very important topic. So thank you for joining me today, Lynnea. Yeah, let's just go ahead and get started with the big question of how might we define birth trauma?
That is a really big question. And the truth is that we cannot define birth trauma. Only the woman who has experienced it can. And so, that being said, it might be rooted from the unforeseen circumstances of birth. Maybe there was a complication around the birthing time, including in the postpartum time. Maybe it was, an energy in her space that, distracted and interrupted her, or a presence that was not loving and supportive, whether that was a support person, whether that was her care provider or a support staff member. Or maybe her birth was just like really fast and intense, or really long and intense, or in any way not what she expected, and she has not yet integrated that experience.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that description. And I would also add that sometimes it can be something that didn't happen. So
Yes.
something that maybe somebody, I'll just use my personal example super quick, that, in one of my birth experiences, there was kind of a tense moment, and my midwife did not ask me how the baby was doing. And just at a critical moment, she was concerned about something that had happened and was just saying, "Oh, I think we need to transfer to the hospital," but her not having communicated that with me was really, really challenging for me to get over. To work through. And I just wanted to say that sometimes it's things that didn't happen, and things that might be harder to see, such as that, like maybe from the outside perspective, it's this beautiful natural birth or whatever, what have you. It like looks like it's going really great, but you don't know always how that woman feels about herself. I mean, I've had a birth doula client who, as her doula, I thought her birth was gorgeous. I mean, it was amazing. And just visiting with her 3 days after the birth, she was so hard on herself and had, like all of these feelings that I had not been aware of during her birth. So I could see clearly that she was processing it differently than I had perceived it. So definitely any sort of trauma or experiences in general, but we're talking about trauma right now. It's all about how the person who experienced it is perceiving their experience, and how they're thinking of themselves. And the one other thing that I'd like to add is that sometimes a traumatic birth experience might not be something that happened in labor or even in birth, but could be in that immediate postpartum, like especially that first 24 hours, maybe further out, but there's a lot of vulnerability still present in that first 24 hours. And so I would encourage the audience, anybody who's listening to this, that when you're thinking about yourself or other people, if something happened in that first tender, 24 to 48 hours or so, that could still be birth trauma, and you may still experience it afterwards as birth trauma. So I just want to expand our definition a little bit in that way. And that leads me to another question that I'd love for us to talk about, which is, what do you think are some of the ways that a person can identify if they've experienced birth trauma? If they're like, the birth has happened or is happening or has happened, and maybe that's not like clear in their consciousness. What are some identification factors?
First I would say, checking in with how does your body feel about this? Setting aside your logical brain and really tuning into, does this feel good to me? And if you are like postpartum, when you're reflecting on your birth story, how does each part of your story sit with you? How does it feel? Or is there a part of your story that maybe sticks out more than the others, and why? What about that part of your story is calling your attention? And postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, I hear a lot of times happen in, immediately after birth. And for me, that was true, except it was not postpartum depression and anxiety. It was birth trauma. Mm-hmm. And it was something that I didn't have words for. And I did not have medications and things, but I know most women do. Women who go into their doctor's offices after birth and talk about these symptoms that they're having, they're not being asked, how do you feel about your birth? How did your birth feel to you? They're just given a pill. And so to take that step back and reflect on, how do I feel about my birth and the time after my birth? And is that, manifesting in really physical, emotional ways for me, is a really good question to ask yourself and to notice in other people. And for me, I also had PTSD after both of my births, with flashbacks and nightmares, really severely for a while. And I would avoid driving past the hospital. I live in a rural town, and basically to go anywhere, you have to drive past the hospital. So I would always take the way longer route of the back roads just to avoid triggers. And so I'm sharing that because if that's something that you are doing, or something that you recognize someone close to you doing, it could be a red flag, and maybe worthy to start asking them, how are you feeling about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think another potential identification factor is being touched in a certain place on your body. And that could, you could all of a sudden, it doesn't even have to be in like an intimate context. It could be intimate context, either with yourself, like maybe when you're bathing, or with your partner, or even the way your child touches you at some point, or anybody. But there may be a part of your body that's holding on to the trauma, a part of your body where you experienced something, but you separated internally, like, mind and body split during the experience. And so having that physical part of your body touched brings something back up. And it might, I'm bringing this up too, because when that happens, that can be a really disorienting experience. All of a sudden, your body's remembering something that your mind doesn't really remember. And that can be confusing. It can be scary. It's even possible to relive the experience. And again, I'm not sharing this to scare anybody, but to say that if these things are happening, it's good. I recommend to like consider that and to talk to somebody that you trust about it, because I don't think that that's something to be brushed off. It's usually your body holds on to things and is helping you out and trying to bring something to your attention that needs some love and processing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So we jumped right in to what this can look like and how you can possibly identify if you had experienced birth trauma or if somebody you loved has experienced it. I will love for us to share with especially expecting parents, or even people who are planning on making a baby, and people who work with women and families through this time. What are some ways that we can educate ourselves and prepare ourselves to go through birth and early postpartum more like as intact as possible, like as connected to yourself and present with your experience, um, and aware, so that if something does arise that is going a way that we did not expect, how can we help ourselves be prepared for the unexpected without obsessing about it? Super hard question, Lynnea. Go for it.
I got this. um, so first I would say familiarizing yourself with physiologic birth and physiologic postpartum. Um, what is that hormonal process in your body if left undisturbed? What does that optimally look like? And then I would move into familiarizing yourself with the systems that you're working within. So that might be, like the obstetric system of the hospitals around you, the regulations that your midwives are following. Um, Recently this question has come up: at which point will you abandon me? A
Mm.
lot of people who, are planning a home birth or a birth with a midwife, um, they reach a certain point in their pregnancy, or there are certain signs of potential complications throughout their pregnancy where the midwife then transfers their care without the the birthing woman being ready for that or wanting that. And so to be aware of these things ahead of time can definitely help you understand why the people around you are acting in the ways that they are. Um, and also, you can avoid those systems if they don't feel good to you. Um, and I would say, even for people who are planning, to free birth and avoid those systems altogether, in the case that you change your mind or transfers for any reason, to be familiar with those systems is still beneficial. Um, and then it kind of comes down to the acceptance that birth is a natural process of life. And so there are aspects that we can control and there are aspects that we cannot. And to be accepting that we cannot control the whole thing, um, to be familiar with what might arise, and without, like you said, obsessing about it, what can you do to mentally prepare yourself to surrender to what might need to happen next? Or in the case of this emergency, what is your value? What do you want to have done, or how do you want that situation to be handled if it happened? Um, and then really to just surround yourself with people who really love you and who you love and have a really deep, trusted connection with, so
Mm.
that you can feel held and supported in your birth space. I
Yeah,
think that's really huge.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that um, it's definitely relevant for people to mentally prepare and physically and emotionally and spiritually prepare no matter what your birth plans are. Regardless of if you're planning a home birth with a midwife or a hospital birth or a free birth. And a lot of times when people plan free births, there's still somebody or more than one person present with them, just not necessarily in a clinical capacity. So definitely feeling really confident with your care team and your birth setting, and being accepting of yourself and of the process of birth, which, like you said, it's like life itself. There's always going to be unexpected things. I'm sitting in a room right now and I have the doors closed, but it's not, you know, I didn't lock all the doors. It's not in my control if somebody just bursts open a door. Like, that probably won't happen, but it could happen. So, yeah, you never entirely can be certain about your birth and what could happen. But I think that it's super helpful to, during pregnancy and even beforehand, work on being as embodied as possible. So figuring out how you connect with your body and how you can feel present in your body. So sometimes embodiment sounds like this woo-woo term, or like, what is that magical thing, embodiment? And it just literally means feeling present in your body. Like right now, can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you feel your sits bones, whatever they're touching? Like, can you feel the container of your body, and can you feel your life force, or however you want to describe it, that's inside your body? And feeling present within your body and within yourself is huge for, I'm going to say, for not just for in case trauma happens, but for if something really amazing happens. And birth is so multifaceted that a lot of times there are really amazing things that happen and maybe not so amazing things that happen. I've never heard somebody say like, oh yeah, my birth was boring or it was mediocre. Like, there's always some things that happen, and the more present you are, the more you can like fully experience what's amazing about it and be more present for if something is happening that's unexpected, so that you're either like able to communicate about it in the moment to somebody that you trust who's around you. And sometimes the communication is part of a traumatic experience, like people not listening to you. So the more present you are with yourself, you're able to hold yourself in your experience. The more present you are, the better you're able to remember and process things as they happen. And if you do, if you do check out at some point, it's essentially a survival mechanism. That's nothing to beat yourself up about either. That's just something to be aware of. Like, even if you know that going into birth, like, okay, dissociation is part of a traumatic, like that happens when people are experiencing trauma. So now I know if I start to dissociate, maybe something is happening that I'm not fully aware of that doesn't feel good to me. And yeah, it's definitely a sensitive topic, and I think even talking about it is sensitive. But I feel like it's a really important conversation to have, and I feel like we really need more trauma-informed education around birth, and also trauma-informed care providers and supporters of all types. So yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is also like building community with other women and other families who have or will be giving birth. And I know that can be a little bit risky because there is so much room for sharing misinformation and like fear mongering each other both ways, you know. But I would like to say that as you're going into sharing these experiences, whether that's through women's circles or like online groups or however you choose to do this, that you remain in the consciousness that, like your body and your choices are your responsibility and other people's realities are not your reality. But that you can take things away from their experiences to help educate yourself. An example of that might be you're in a women's circle and three of these women have the same doctor or have had this doctor, and sharing what their birth experiences were like can help you potentially foster questions for this doctor next time you see him. Like, oh, he hasn't mentioned anything about that to me before. Maybe I'll bring it up and see what he says. And then if that doesn't feel good to me, maybe I'll look for a different doctor. Or, somebody who maybe had a really difficult time breastfeeding, because breastfeeding can be a really, really powerful way to reconnect with your baby after a traumatic birth experience and really heal that hormonal connection. Um, maybe somebody had a really difficult experience breastfeeding and you are going into your first birth hoping to breastfeed. You can be aware that sometimes these struggles do exist and you can support this mother in getting through them the same way you would expect or hope for support in return. And in doing so, not only are you building community, but you're increasing your awareness of what possibilities may exist for you that you didn't think of before. I find very often in my work that, moms, they focus on my baby is going to need XYZ when they are born. And they don't focus on I am going to need XYZ when I'm born as a mother.
Yeah.
And so, putting women together in this community format helps them think of themselves too, which is another place where trauma can stem from, is like my needs were not met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so being aware of what those needs might be and then being able to plan for that the best you can. Nobody's experience is absolutely perfect, but doing the best you can, whatever that looks like moment to moment, is worth giving yourself credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you were starting to get into this just now, but I would love if you would share a glimpse into your village prenatals, because I feel like that's a really beautiful example of women coming together in community prenatally to prepare for birth.
Yeah. So my village prenatals, they are super casual. We meet once a month. And what it is a group of pregnant women coming together with a group of non-pregnant women. The pregnant women take turns tuning into their intuition in different ways. We do a guided meditation of going into your dream birth. What does that look like? Like, you are healthy, your baby is healthy, and every detail is up for you to manifest. And so the point of that is to connect with what is important to you and what you want your birth to look like. And then moving forward through your pregnancy to make choices that help you get closer to that dream. And then, like, the non-pregnant women will do belly massage and help the pregnant women listen to their baby's heartbeat with the fetoscope. And essentially, it is a way for the pregnant women to come together, feel loved, feel supported in a non-clinical, care environment. And during that, get like a deeper connection with their babies, a deeper connection with themselves, with their values, and with their intuition.
Awesome. I feel like that's such a beautiful example of building community and nurturing maternal autonomy, which I feel like are two huge things in, I want to say, in trauma prevention, and also just having like happier, more whole experiences. And yeah, I would love for you to share also. I know I'm jumping a little bit here, but in the event that if birth trauma is something that somebody has experienced, I know that your organization, Healing Birth, is focused on helping women heal through this process. So could you speak to that a little bit as we're wrapping up here?
Yeah, absolutely. So Diana and I hold birth story medicine sessions. And what that is sort of the bridge between like professional counseling and talking with, um, or basically doing nothing is how Diana words it. And I think that's a really accurate way of describing what we do. And so Diana and I are both women who have experienced birth trauma, and experienced healing from birth. We're both people who understand the systems around birth culture, the history of birth culture, and we understand physiologic birth. And so, it can be really, really important to talk to somebody about your birth trauma who understands birth and that birth trauma is unique. And that doesn't have to be Diana or myself. It can be, anybody that you trust and feel good talking to about this, of course. But we are there to like listen to your story, to hold your experience with you, and to help guide you through self-healing.
Nice. Yeah, I love how those are kind of, I feel like in a way, the village prenatal idea is kind of like those can be kind of counterparts to each other, which you just shared, because I love how the in the village prenatal, women are having that opportunity to share their dream birth and be held in community. And then no matter what happens through their birth, there's still this group of women that is aware of how this woman wanted her birth to be. And that can just be so powerful to feel yourself held in that way. And then again, in your birth story medicine sessions, you're holding space for the story to unfold and for healing to happen in whatever way that it needs to, for anything unexpected that has happened, or even I started to share this earlier as well, that sometimes you can have a really amazing experience, and if you're not really embodied, you might not feel that. Like you might not feel the full um, power of your birth experience, like the positive aspects. And so I've found personally that sometimes like that's my healing process, is reconnecting afterwards with not only like, navigating the things that didn't go the way I wanted to, but also feeling like, wow, I just flipping pushed a human out of my vagina. Like, I'd like to feel good about that a little bit, like that's a huge deal. So, yeah. So thank you so much for talking with me today and for getting this conversation started and for doing so with so much respect and grace and compassion. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're so inspirational, and I'm really excited to share this with more people.
I'm really excited about it too, and thank you for having me.
Yay, you're welcome. Mm. Ah.